Hello and welcome to ESI Focus, where we dive into a specific sector of the esports industry with special guests. My name is Kerry Wananen. I'm head of multimedia content at Esports Insider. This is the first episode of our mini-series focused on the legal intricacies within esports. And this is presented by law firm Sheppard Mullin. Big shout out to Sheppard Mullin. Sheppard Mullin represents athletes, influencers, and content creators, media marketing companies, tournament operators, venues, investors, everything under the sun in the esports space with a variety of manners. And today we are joined by Brian Anderson, who's a partner of Sheppard Mullin, and Michelle Tierney, Director of Commercial Partnerships at Guild Esports. Hey guys, how we doing?
Doing well, Kerry. Thank you.
Happy to hear that. Let's start off with some introductions. Let's start with you, Michelle. Could you talk a little bit about your journey that led you to become head of commercial partnerships at Guild Esports?
Yes. So I've just been here for over a year in the esports space. Previous to that, I spent the majority of my career in traditional sports, and most of that was in football. I was with Arsenal Football Club for 14 years in the commercial team there, and saw the commercial business really transform from, the stadium that was at Highbury into a new stadium with Emirates, and all of those different commercial opportunities that come not only focused around the stadium, but then also branching out to the kind of the global approach that most of the teams now have in terms of their commercial strategy. And from then on, really moved through onto the player side of the business. So commercial contracts for elite football players from around the globe, really looking at how to help them monetize their big audiences that they were commanding. So really, as the social media space was really kind of exploding for them, making sure that they were not only commercially relevant, but also helping them build their brand persona online, and making sure that they was aligning with the right commercial partners to help really build their brand and take it forward, which kind of now sees me where I am here today in esports. And I think the experience on the social media side has really, really helped me in this space, because obviously everything is so digitally focused, and the kind of intricacies around activating in this space. Guild Esports was born during this COVID era, and actually it's made us we only look at digital inventory at the moment. So now the world is opening up. It's actually given us a real nice chance to start to looking at what other activations that we can take to in real life, and actually really looking forward to starting to connect it with our fan base on a more kind of physical perspective. But very, very different world, but really, really enjoying it, and also really enjoying my time with the team that we've built over at Guild Esports.
Yeah, such an interesting challenge to build something that has sort of only existed in the digital space as of yet. As you said, that you guys started in a lockdown situation while everything has been online. Yeah, a lot of interesting challenges there. Brian, you've been at Sheppard Mullin for 17 years, definitely long before there was even thoughts about lockdowns. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey there?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I'm a partner at Sheppard Mullin, and I lead the firm's advertising and commercial practices. And a big part of the advertising practice is sponsorship deals. Traditionally for, that 17 years at Sheppard Mullin, and actually 19 years total, most of that has been around traditional sports. So representing brands and influencers and technology platforms, doing marketing deals and advertising deals with teams and leagues, and players, but in traditional sports. And then more recently have been moving into doing sponsorship deals in esports. And again, representing some of the biggest brands in the world, doing deals with players, teams, leagues, and events and thinking about all of those same legal issues and commercial issues, but how do you apply them to a relatively new activity in esports and the unique issues that pop up doing those deals. So I've been very fortunate to represent companies like MasterCard doing their League of Legends deal, and Red Bull Media doing player deals with Ninja, for example. So also agencies doing deals with esports athletes from around the world.
Amazing. Well, I mean, you just mentioned some of the largest esports partnerships to date with MasterCard and also Michelle with Guild. You guys have a very unique partnership with Subway, one of the most unique in the space, I would say. I think let's kick off with talking a little bit about what are some unique nuances in navigating such high profile sponsorships in the space that maybe differ, perhaps not so much to a lot versus the traditional sports world. Michelle, let's kick off with you.
Yeah, I think some of the key call outs that we have come across is really trying to understand what the brand needs up front and really trying to put that a lot of the working around all the challenges that you might face in order to make sure that you create that rights package. So there are rights that are evolving every day in esports. There are new ways of activating. There are new things that you can package up. And actually, it's really trying to put everything in around the front end to understand the brand and what their needs are and how you can help solve some challenges that they might come up against to really make sure that you identify the right package, which you can then obviously put into a long form. And I think the biggest kind of difference really over from a traditional sports sense is previously when I've looked at deals, we were really dealing with the deal that the rights holder owns. But within esports, especially within an organization, you're also dealing with humans. You're contracting rights out to players and to content creators. And with that comes a lot of risk. So brands who are traditionally in this space and are used to dealing with sponsorship, or even those who are brand new to sponsorship, rightly so, they want to be as risk adverse as possible when going into a deal with a rights holder. But there is there's a lot of learnings, and I think starting to reach a bit more of a flexibility on if this is the demographic that you so need to want to work with and target, then there has to be an understanding that there's a kind of a different way to approach a contract and the risks that go around that.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, do you have anything to add there, Brian?
Yeah, I can pick up on that a little bit. I think that's a really good. Michelle makes a really good point about the different rights involved in esports, and I think brands can partner with somebody like Guild and with others to help them understand that, because I think a lot of traditional brands come into these deals with very traditional ideas about what the sponsorship's going to look like, and maybe don't even understand all of the opportunities that are available to them and the unique ways to engage with consumers through esports. So I think that's very important. And some of the other unique issues that, and Michelle picked up on this too, is that who owns the rights? Like when you're doing a deal with Arsenal Football Club, you have a pretty good sense of what Arsenal owns and controls and what you can do with them. But in traditional esports situation, you've got the game. Somebody owns rights in the game. Somebody owns rights in the league. The players have their own individual rights called publicity rights in the United States. So can you use? You might do a deal for an event, a tournament, and then you want to use player images in the marketing for that as a brand, right? And I typically am representing brands, so I'll tend to take that perspective on these things. But you find out you can't, because those players obviously own and control their own publicity rights, the right to use their name, likeness, and image. So I think that is a fundamental question at the beginning of this deal: is what are the rights that you're interested in, and who owns and controls them, and how do you get those then through the contract? And those are important issues that come up early on.
Could either or both of you guys speak a little bit about what Michelle brought up of in terms of packages or programs that you would approach a brand in terms of, okay, we'll sign up for a sponsorship here and here's what we have to offer. Do you guys have to really explain these things to client or not? In your case, Brian, to clients, or in Michelle's case, to the sponsors and partners of what they are signing up to get? Or is there any miscommunication there, or does it come across pretty clear?
I think for this space, the beauty of it is that there's no blueprint, and we are gaining more and more inventory to be able to package up and sell. So the traditional model of a kind of gold, silver, bronze package, I think that's quite archaic in sponsorship anyway, but it's really archaic in this space because it kind of needs to make sure you don't want to package up a load of rights that a brand is not going to use, because that's no good for you and it's no good for the brand and it's no good for your audience at the end of the day. So who's going to get anything out of that? So just trying to shoehorn a brand into a certain package because that's what your on the shelf package says. So it's really, as I pointed out in the beginning, about understanding what the brand's needs are to work out something that's quite bespoke. We've been very fortunate at Guild because we are at the very beginning. We can be very flexible in terms of how we slice and dice different packages. We have a rough understanding, but we also have quite a lot of in-house products that we are selling. So whether that's around the academy or kind of areas around content creators or pros. So therefore we can really give a bit of flexibility whether a brand wants to be integrated across the entire business or just wants to look at one area. And I think moving away from those traditional kind of tiered packages is going to be the best thing for sponsorship as a whole, but also really sponsorship in esports. I think it's making sure that you don't leave anything on the table that just doesn't get activated because it's no good for anyone.
Yeah, Brian, can you speak a little bit about maybe what brands are looking for in terms of these sponsorships when they're approaching, as you sort of mentioned, leagues or even orgs or individual players as well?
Yeah, happy to. And, I think this is evolving quickly as brands get more and more familiar with esports and the different rights packages and how they're unique to other sponsorship deals. But I still think that we're in this stage where traditional brands, this is new for them. Maybe it's their first esports deal. And so some of the issues that come up for me a lot are, and Michelle said it best, like you really need to think about this as a partnership and that, it's not just, here's the package, thanks for the sponsorship money, good luck, but really helping the brand understand what it is they want and helping them get it. But timing considerations, like the other thing that, sometimes these are for a single event, or a season where you have multiple events, but thinking about the timing of it and what happens, this will be a big theme for me is doing like a pre-mortem. What could go wrong? What could go wrong here? So what is the timing? What if events get postponed? What if events get canceled? Especially in after COVID, thinking about these things a little bit more. What if your sponsorship, your brand sponsorship is focused on a specific player or a specific team, and they don't advance very far in the tournament, and so you're not getting the profile you had hoped for as a brand. But just kind of scenario planning those things and helping the brand get comfortable with how that works. And there's a lot of different options for solving that, including potential make goods if things don't work out exactly the way you had hoped in a tournament or in a season, timing of payments, and that sort of thing, so that you can help the brand get more comfortable with some of the uncertainty that's inherent in a sports marketing deal, any sports marketing deal, but maybe even more so in what in their eyes is a new environment, a new platform with esports.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think it's so right in terms of unpacking as many challenges as possible up the front. spending so much more time working out of all the things that can go wrong. And it may sound like a bit more pessimistic, but you're much more likely to find out what the right solution is if you spend most of your time thinking of all those different things that can break down. So sometimes it can be a bit more of a trickier conversation, but it's best to have it done in the early stages and at this contracting process, rather than once you're too far down the line and some scenarios haven't been thought about. But something that we really tried to spend a lot of time with a brand in the initial period of the sales process is the education part. So helping different members of the brand really understanding the world that we play in, spending a lot of time there. And it's sometimes it doesn't even result in a benefit for us, because maybe they've learned so much about esports and they look at something different, whether it's a league or whether it's a publisher, etc. But the educational process there is vital, because there are so many brands that have never been here before, or this is their first foray. So that's something that we tried to spend a lot of time on, and actually I think that will pay off in the long run.
Yeah, I wrote a piece in January where I spoke with a lot of attorneys in reference for a sort of COVID clause, if you will, because so many deals had to be put on pause or canceled or just were off the table because of, basically the pandemic, and a lot of agreements didn't have anything in there. And then a lot of things are now, this is explicitly stated, such a sort of natural disaster in a way, absolves each party, or some other qualifier for the deal is null and void. That's interesting in your case, Michelle, because these were all perhaps maybe built into your agreements, but perhaps not. Brian, did you have any experience with any of those things last year, or even continuing into now?
Yeah, a lot of experience. I don't remember the exact number, but me and my team were keeping track. We had to renegotiate. It was something like 40 or 50 sponsorship deals around COVID, where pre-COVID, everybody sort of put into their contract this provision called force majeure, which is, not that it should be, is treated as boilerplate, you just kind of throw it in every contract. And it basically says that, the parties are excused from performing if there's an act of God, an earthquake, or something beyond the party's reasonable control that prevents them from performing. And a lot of parties to contracts took the position that the COVID-19 pandemic was a force majeure event. And that led to a lot of disputes. And for the most part, it ended up in, like I said, renegotiation. People were, I would say, in my experience with those 40 or 50 contracts, everybody was pretty cool about it and tried to figure out a way to solve it, which was great. But it did create a lot of ambiguity and a lot of stress, because you had parties saying, well, this is a force majeure event, we don't have to perform. You had other parties saying, well, this isn't the first pandemic. This is foreseeable. So, therefore you should have planned for it, and it's not a force majeure event. And the law didn't really provide a clear answer. I won't go into a lot of the details. It varies by jurisdiction, especially in the United States, where contract varies by state. So you have almost 50 different versions of how to interpret a force majeure clause. But luckily, most parties went to the table and tried to come up with something. And you had some unique situations where, you had brands who had paid millions and millions of dollars for in-stadium branding experiences. And then the example I'm thinking of was Serie A. And you had, Serie A teams saying, oh, well, we're performing, we're playing the games, but there's no fans in the stadium. So the brand's not getting any value from that. So they're like, but we're performing, we're having the games. So you can see how this led to some really difficult conversations. So now, people, I would say, are not treating force majeure as boilerplate, and you're drafting it very specifically to talk about pandemics, or maybe even specifically about COVID, and what happens. What happens if you're playing games with no fans in the stands? What happens if tournaments are postponed? If an esports event is postponed, or what if it's canceled? These are all things now that are being talked about upfront, versus just putting in a standard clause and hoping that it never comes up.
Yeah, what a nightmare on a legal standpoint, and also in the experience of what we've all had this last year. But as the sun is shining on the horizon, let's keep a positive outlook on things, huh? Michelle, I'm really curious about if there's anything that you could speak about in terms of securing large sponsorships, because so far Guild hasn't missed, in the sense that hasn't gotten any small sponsorships at all. The organization seems to really have a clear sort of path set out for large, meaningful, not only sponsorships, but as you mentioned, partnerships between the organization and the brands that they're working in. How does this differ potentially with your experience in working with smaller agreements?
I think the setup is very similar, because you still have to think about making sure that we come to the right deal that's not only the right value, but also the right package and the right rights that you are able to activate in the first place. I guess the approach that we have at Guild is we are trying to take different learnings from different areas. So some from esports, some from traditional sports. We have subject matter experts across the board in the kind of their field. And we're making sure that the brands don't only have access to the esports world, but they have access to the wider network that we have. So whether that's relying on our internal capabilities, whether that's also, going across the more diverse audiences that we're now able to attract that goes wider than esports. I think when you're looking at the bigger partnerships and with brands that, as we say, are new to this space, they really have to invest in you and the people. So you need to make sure that we have the right people in place to deliver that. And I think what Guild has been brilliant in letting the partnerships team do and giving us support is not just the sales process, but in the servicing side. So, that partnership needs to be handled with kid gloves from the minute that it walks in the door. And they have committed to me and the team to making sure that we're supported so that we retain the partnerships that we've been able to develop and also continue to provide value for our audience by generating a more longer term approach with our fans. So I think making sure that you can garner that trust from the brand is if you're wanting to go along with go and look at the really kind of bigger tiered partnerships, you have to make sure, you have to be realistic and look at internally and make sure that you have the right setup in order to deliver that. And if the people at the top are willing to stand behind you, which they have done at Guild, and they've made sure that all of our requirements have been met and they will continue to do so as we grow, I think that will set us up for hopefully attracting some more big hero sponsorships.
Yeah, Brian, do you have any experience with maybe that you could share about navigating the differences between large and small sponsorships and partnerships that perhaps maybe wouldn't seem so obvious in terms of the differences?
Yeah, I think when I'm looking at the difference in size of the deal in terms of dollar figures, for example, I think as the value of the sponsorship goes up, there's going to be obviously more concern and more risk involved. And so from a contract perspective, which is where, I sort of am looking at it, start thinking about protections to make sure the brand feels like they're getting value throughout the term of the contract. So maybe doing installment payments or performance-based payments to make sure that, they're getting the value before they're spending all of the money. And also the level of detail in the promotional activities goes way up. I think, especially in esports, I think there's still, from what I'm seeing, there's still a tendency to be a little bit loose in the formalities of the sponsorship deal. And so maybe, there's a rough, document where they're listing out the sponsorship activities and they just kind of want to attach that to the contract. And it's somewhat vague and a little bit unclear exactly what the brand is expecting and what the other party is expecting, which can lead to disputes. So in those larger deals, we spend a lot of time focusing on the detail about the exact placement and proximity of the brand's logo in various situations. I work with clients sometimes where we'll do graphical representations exactly how we want branding to appear, when, where, and that sort of thing. So that level of detail comes up in those bigger deals. Also, some concept called ambush marketing will come up too, which is very interesting in esports. Not a new concept. It's been ambush marketing is basically when an advertiser takes some action around an event to get its brand, to sort of push its brand in front of consumers' eyeballs, and they're not the exclusive sponsor of that event. So they're sort of stealing away from the exclusive sponsors activity. I think a famous example is there was at the FIFA World Cup in South Africa, there was a Dutch brewery that had many young women wearing bright orange clothes with the beer's logo on it, and Budweiser was the exclusive beer of the World Cup. So they were stealing attention away from Budweiser at the World Cup. So that would be ambush marketing. And to go back to esports, and esports being relatively new, how does that look? Like, what are the opportunities for ambush marketing in esports? That isn't as well known as, maybe a baseball game or a football game or the World Cup. So thinking about those issues, we'll spend a lot of time negotiating ambush marketing clauses in those larger sponsorship deals. And again, scenario planning, like, what is the definition of exclusivity? Maybe naming specific competitors who are, can't be involved, putting obligations on the event organizer, the team, the athlete, whoever the other party is, again, from the brand perspective, and actually putting an obligation on them to try to prevent that from happening, and putting that into the contract. So those kind of issues will come up and be more heavily negotiated in a larger esports sponsorship deal.
What kind of clause would you include, or what would be involved in an ambush marketing or ambush advertisement clause for an agreement?
Yeah, it can be sort of a commercially reasonable efforts to prevent that from happening. And so if it in that FIFA example, they would have some level of control over security at events, and they obviously would have control over signage in the stands, or what people can bring into a stadium. And this all translates right to esports events that have a live component to it as well. But it's really mostly about creating a contractual obligation. And that obligation is to try to prevent it. And that might be not a strict, rule, strict liability type scenario, but more like you're going to use commercially reasonable efforts to try to prevent it. You're going to do what you can to stop it. And then maybe from there you get into specifics, like, security will not allow people to bring large displays into the stadium. So you prevent somebody from holding up a brand sign or something like that. So you could then get into specific examples, but it's usually that general obligation and then maybe some specific things that are unique to that event.
Right. So creating sort of contractual obligations to protect the partnership, to protect the partners, to ensure that this agreement, the reason why we are signing it, and the investment that we're making in this agreement is protected by all parties involved.
Yeah,
Correct.
and I think from a rights holder perspective, those types of clauses are very justified, and I think how we have made ourselves comfortable is just making sure that we have adequate processes on our side to make sure that we mitigate the risk as much as possible. And I think your comment, Brian, around being so specific around even some of the logo placements and the sizing and etc. I'd seen previous contracts in this space and they didn't have that, and I was quite surprised because it's quite traditional to do that with shirt sponsorships, etc. So making sure that those types of things are watertight. But for us, I think it's always looking at what it is that the brand really need to get comfortable, and then making sure that we kind of work backwards to put necessary steps in to just try and mitigate that risk as much as we possibly can. And hopefully that's what keeps it there, and we don't have to go back and look at that contract again.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a very recent example. I just represented a major brand in a Formula One sponsorship deal. It was one of those larger deals, so we went very specific about logo placement. We had pages and pages of graphical representations of where we wanted the logo on the car. I was watching the Monaco Grand Prix, which was the first race that this car was going to be in, and they happened to get a camera shot of right where I knew our logo was supposed to be, and I was like, it's blocked by the mirror. Like, you can only see half of it. And so I'm texting with my client, and we were on the phone with them and said, here's what it looks like in the contract. Here's what it looks like on Brian Anderson's cell phone that took a screenshot. And by the next Grand Prix, it was fixed. But that going into that detail solved it very quickly. Everybody's friends. If that wasn't there, if it was just sort of like, you're going to put the logo on the car, you hereby agree to put the logo on the car. That could have been a dispute. It could have blown up the deal.
Mm. And also, it's a byproduct of working in sponsorship that we can no longer enjoy the sport without noticing logo placements and whether they're right or wrong. Because I think that's something that I've watched for very, very many years. Sadly to admit, but yeah, that's what happens.
I'm like you, Michelle. Same here.
Yeah, I've heard somewhere that in a way, the like length, depth, and specificity of a contract is a sort of roadmap of a history of the company not being satisfied with previous contracts. Basically, that each time that something sort of doesn't go their way, that the next time they are sure to include it to prevent it from happening. So it is a sort of, if something is really specific in a track record or in a contract, you can assume that at some point in time in the past, it wasn't met to the requirements. So they really needed to specify that in order to for everyone to be happy. And I guess sort of my last question here would be, what are, in your guys' experiences, what are some of the most important aspects of sponsorship activation agreements? Brian, you sort of touched on this a little bit too, of really being detailed and clear about what is expected in this execution, but perhaps if there's more to it that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think that from a high level, that's the most important is scenario planning, thinking about what could go wrong ahead of time, and then having a written contract and being as clear as possible about everybody's obligations and also what the remedies might be for problems, because not every breach or issue under the contract should end in litigation or termination or some sort of like blowing up the deal type of thing, but creating opportunities for negotiation, escalation, cure periods, because sometimes there's just innocent mistakes that can be fixed. So kind of just trying to create that process so that it remains this partnership of, everybody's trying to reach the same goal here. Then, more specifically, like getting into the nuts and bolts of the contract, I think thinking about the payment terms and making sure the incentives are all aligned. As the brand, I don't want to have paid all the money out and then I'm hoping that everything's going to go well. I'd like to keep some financial incentive down the line for continued cooperation and performance in case, they get maybe they're more excited about the new sponsor and less excited about the old sponsor, some situation like that. And then jurisdiction, this is more of a more boring legal question, but esports deals are inherently international. I mean, the players are from all over the world. The audience is global. All of the deals that we're involved in, there's parties in, 2, 3, 4 different jurisdictions. So thinking about which law governs the contract, which is very important in terms of enforcing, but also IP rights, dispute resolution. Are you going to be are you going to go to arbitration? Are you going to go to court? Is that going to be in England? Is it going to be in New York? Those questions are very, very important. Indemnities, which is, basically one party promises to protect the other party from some event, for example, maybe a lawsuit from a third party. So we spend a lot of time negotiating those indemnities. So those are, sort of more formal legal questions that come up are very important. So the process, is usually sort of like you negotiate a term sheet, which I recommend. Negotiate a term sheet. Really, the parties sort of agree on the broad framework of the deal. The big issues like the amount of money involved and the payment terms and the big, marketing activations that are involved, the rights that are involved, kind of get everybody all on the same page before you go to the more long form contract. But then once you get into that long form contract, you're going to be negotiating things like indemnities and limitation of liability, reps and warranties, the parties promising that they actually own the rights they say they own. There's going to be probably cross trademark licenses. So, making sure, from the brand's point of view, you're protecting your trademark if you're giving the other party the ability to use it. So those are some of the big issues that come up when we're negotiating these sponsorship deals. Spend a lot of time negotiating those.
I think I feel like you've just entered into my mind with all the pain points. They're the ones they're the common ones that usually kind of we spend most of our time in negotiating. And I think it's exciting when you get to that stage of signing a deal. You're real close. It's normally something you've been working on for a very, very long time. But it's so important not to kind of let your heart kind of race through that process and make sure that you really spend a lot of time there understanding on what those different scenarios would be or what where that actually leads you from a rights holder perspective, and making sure that you're kind of not just entering into that just because of the willingness to move that across the line at the very last stage. So sometimes it's the longest part, but actually it's so worthwhile just making sure that you all spend the most amount of time there, because those parts in the long form are usually all of the ones where you'll start and you'll both be so far apart in terms of the brand versus rights holder, and you'll find that happy medium, and you kind of, it is quite a long process, but it's worth it in the long run to spend as much time there as possible.
Yeah, and by the way, like a lot of these, I'm sure Michelle, you've seen this as well. In an ideal world, you have the time to do these things, but I don't know about you, Michelle, but a lot of times it's like this opportunity came up to sponsor this boxing fight that's happening on Saturday and it's Thursday. So a lot of times we're having to jump on these and negotiate all of these very important points that we've gone through very quickly. And so that's the ability to think about those issues, but also to execute them, quick, because these events are scheduled, they're going to happen. So oftentimes we're under some time pressure to get them done.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the timings is all. I'm always told that's when we're going to sign, and everyone has to work towards it. I'll be honest, it's always worked out in the right way, but it does just mean that you kind of you don't want to be in that, going through those major points, especially like the indemnity and the liability side. That really needs to be made sure that all parties are understanding of what they're entering into, and it's not something that we kind of just move on to the next stage. Because ideally, as I said, you put that contract in the drawer and you never look at it again. But you know what, you don't know what's around the corner. So to make sure that really everybody understands what they're entering into in that section.
Yeah. I mean, it completely makes sense to sort of first really define and get to an agreement of the core elements, like the nitty gritty of it, before you start, going through the long form aspect of things, the things that you're really then maybe disputing or having conversations about the language used in the contract or these sort of things, to really get things across the line first of, let's make sure that we agree on the same thing and that we both understand it. And then we'll get involved in determining the little bits and pieces of everything. Makes sense to me. Well, that about brings us up to our time. Thank you so much, Brian and Michelle, for being on this podcast with me. And big shout out to Sheppard Mullin again for supporting this podcast and helping shed some light on the legal intricacies in the esports space, because I think there's quite a lot of them and much more than your average person or even those involved in the industry even really think about so much. So it's been a pleasure to speak with both of you. And again, I really appreciate you guys joining me here. Let's start over. Where can people find you online if they so care to do so?
I can go first. So you can email me, banderson@sheppardmullin.com. Happy to connect with anybody over email and see if we can help. You can also check out some of our blogs. We have an esports blog at mygamecouncil.com, where I contribute articles and other lawyers at Sheppard Mullin contribute articles on the legal issues facing esports, including sponsorship and a lot of other issues that come up. And then our advertising blog is at coveringyourads.com, where we do the same thing, but focused more on advertising, digital advertising and ad tech.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can please feel free to reach out and contact me, Michelle at guildesports.com, whether it's questions around sponsorship or even just kind of questions around the esports space. I'd be happy to connect. And also in terms of the social handles for Guild Esports across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, guildesports.com. So thank you very much for having us, Kerry, as well. And great to meet you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. Nice to meet you too, Michelle. Thank you.
And that wraps up our first episode of ESI Focus, focusing on the legal intricacies of esports. I've been your host, Kerry Wananen. Thank you very much. We have 3 more episodes in this mini series coming out this month, so feel free to tune into those, and I'll see you next time.